I'll be telling you two stories. One will be a visual story that you'll see up front, and one will be the story in which you hear that I read to you. And so my remarks are about the importance of history and of knowing history in particular. One by one, they would emerge from the local archives. Single black and brown faces mixed amongst the seas of whiteness. Class photos, yearbook entries, black-owned newspapers, personal diaries, and more. Local historians had warned these stories could not be found. Some stated, quote, "The South Side does not readily come to mind when phrases such as historically significant or architecturally important are used," end quote. Others stated that, quote, "Finding information about blacks in the earliest days of Tompkins County is not easy, since material about them was not collected into area archives," end quote. Or, quote, "that a rich life that black Ithacans created for themselves was apart from the white community and for the most part unremarked by them." And yet, there we were, one by one, two by two, church group by community picnic. To be certain, the previous quotes are not properly contextualized. In fact, I borrow heavily from local historians, and each of the quotes has been purposefully plucked from more substantial conversations about Ithaca's times and its black past. Earlier historians were not necessarily looking for black folks as their primary objects, or more importantly, as subjects on our own terms. Their collective work forms the foundation of my ongoing exploration, and this is an exploration that's partially formed by the irony and tension of being conspicuously unseen. With the exception of a single image, all the archival photos that you see are gleaned from the history collections right here in this building. I am especially indebted to the assistance and expertise of Donna Eschenbrenner. Mrs. Eschenbrenner, who along with Mary Williams, Carl Okoski, and Natalie King suggested collections, captured high-quality scans of originals, provided bibliographic information, and more. In many respects, my job was the easiest. And if we could, I just had to give those folks a round of applause. They do phenomenal work. By way of a quick tangent, it was about a year ago that I decided that I was going to not be a middle-aged man and get myself back in basketball shape. And on day one, I tore my Achilles, which put me literally in a cast and not walking for a couple months. And so the way in which I spent that time was here at the History Center, literally having folks hand feed me boxes, photo books, you name it. And so I spent a couple days, if not a couple weeks, just going through photo after photo. And so what you see here is the result of that process of me gleaning some photos from these archives here. From the hundreds, if not thousands of images, there are 35 images presented here. These 35 are chosen for their common representation as well as for their specificity. In other words, the images presented here were chosen because they offer a generic representation of my time in the archives. There is no shortage of similar images. However, this narrative and these images were also chosen because they tell of a specific location, a local history, including the names that adorn local landmarks, iconic and regional scenery, as well as events of local importance. Ithaca, New York is a small city in upstate New York. Officially, the U.S. Office of Management and Business refers to the city proper as, quote, "a micropolitan statistical area." It is, as the micropolitan label implies, a small community, but one that is surprisingly diverse, highly educated, over-caffeinated, fairly cosmopolitan, and consistently politically active. It is the prototype of a university or a college town, and as we know, Ithaca is home to both. Ithaca also has a historic black population. There are autobiographies about enslavement and emancipation. The St. James AME Zion Church is listed on our National Registry of the Underground Railroad and has celebrated over 175 years of existence. The Southside Community Center was dedicated by First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. Add the birthplace of Alex Haley, lecture stops for Frederick Douglass, familial connections of Harriet Tubman, the origins of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, home of the Africana Studies and Research Center, and Ithaca has a place in Black American historiography as well as geography. My original quest to delve into the area archives begins with my dissertation research. As Dr. James Turner instructs, quote, "One of the 4 basic tasks of the Africana scholar is to preserve the acknowledged value of rare classical texts in the field, including archival and library collections." My dissertation research utilized archival research in an attempt to construct a counter-narrative on educational experiences of black students in this community. Throughout our recorded history, black folks have a well-documented connection between education and freedom. And I knew that black folks had been in Ithaca as early as 1788, a full century before Ithaca Incorporated would even come into existence. What were the narratives of our students? There is no doubt that the preponderance of school and school-related images are a result of my educational policy bias. However, the overrepresentation also speaks to the prevalence of archival material related to schools and education. I could not see black and brown faces all the time, but when I did, the photographs were frequently associated with schooling, class photos, club photos, athletic banquets, choral concerts, yearbooks, etc. Schools were, and schools remain, the main social enterprise of any community. Schools are the place where families send their most prized possessions. These significant institutions, usually crossing wide swaths of geography, ideology, and experience, offer some insight into local communities, and probably more importantly, into the lives of people who live there. Therefore, the purpose of this project was twofold. In returning to the archives, my first purpose was to spend some time reading the photographs. Photographs can speak, and the ones that are presented here are the ones that spoke to me. So my intent was to visually read the photographs, to study the archival images, to allow the eye time to scan for subtlety, and to test the colloquial equation that a picture is worth 1,000 words. The second purpose is to retell a part of the black diasporic experience. I believe all history is a retelling. What researchers and academics study as history has already been lived and experienced. In other words, it has already been known. Historians do not discover. Historians retell. Historians recall stories of life, usually only after the living have passed. When I read the photographs, part of the narrative reminds me that presence does not equate to visibility. It is possible to be conspicuously unseen, visible yet ignored. W.E.B. Du Bois famously talks of double consciousness, quote, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, and of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity, end quote. This is the experience of being conspicuously unseen. Inconspicuously seen might have even been preferable, but to be so obviously unseen, that becomes a source of anger. And to be certain, it was anger that drove me back into the archives, to arm myself with the knowledge of and from before, to know something about the before. I was captivated by the images I found. One by one, the photographs became especially noteworthy because of their oneness. There was a frequency of the apparent solitude and singleness. There were classes of 20 or more looking at the camera, and suddenly only one student was looking back at me. My time in the archives made me consider the singular black experience. What part of this singular experience helps to construct the collective? If one is always a member of what Malawi Karenga has termed, quote, a person in community, what do we learn from the existence of isolation? This visual reading pushed me to consider the experience of, quote, being a fly in the bowl of milk. It made me consider the directness of the question posed by Du Bois, how does it feel to be a problem? And I should say that that quote about a fly in the bowl of milk comes from my uncle, Ashfield Buster DeVent, who in Bermuda, during Bermudian integration, walked past a newspaper, showed a single black face in the seas of whiteness, and overheard a white man pass by saying, a fly in the bowl of milk. Possible answers are difficult to infer, but through the archival photographs alone. However, photographs of a 1925 Ku Klux Klan rally in Ithaca, or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1961 speech on behalf of Ithaca Freedom Walk, give some indication of the racial life and strife in Ithaca. As one local historian remarked, quote, although Ithaca has a cherished reputation for racial tolerance that predates the Civil War, the experience of its black community did not differ greatly from those blacks almost anywhere in the nation. And like anywhere USA, there's a combination of suffering and success. Through a broader analysis, my reading of the collection of archives adds to the complexity and nuance of the diasporic black experience. In other words, the diasporic experience is generally lived locally. To be certain, there is regional exchange. Ideas, culture, and families are shared transnationally, but the day-to-day living is a localized experience. The diasporic experience is shaped by the particular places and specific spaces we inhabit daily. It is influenced by the monotony and the minutiae of local routines. Researching specific communities provides the level of detail and nuance necessary for more widely shared generalizations. It provides the complexity required to fully address the totality of the daily diasporic experience. What are the stories of these students? What are the stories of their families? What are the shared narratives we have about their singularly collective experience? The brilliance of still photography lies in its ability to capture moments. It is a technological innovation that allows us to literally frame slices of time. And yet the danger of still photography is the converse proposition. Photographs have a tendency to freeze the living, to simplify the moment, to remove the context, and to eliminate the preceding seconds, hours, or weeks. This is particularly true with black and white images. Devoid of color, black and white photographs remove the vibrancy of living and hearken to a time before high-definition 3D televisions, let alone mass mobile cameras. In this way, these photographs offer a sense of distance by making an implicit reference to an era of bygone technology. To further the sense of distancing, many of the photographs are captured at a physical distance. In other words, the camera is located some distance from the subjects. They are not close-ups, they are group shots, they are class photos, and by their nature, they are deliberate, purposeful, planned, and impersonal. The possibility of double distancing by way of technology and camera location presents the readers with an incomplete history. I'd like to also present or suggest there may be a triple distancing, and that at times there is a physical distance between the singular black student and their white classmates. This may be more speculation currently than visual evidence may provide, but we will do more to read and write life into these photographs. And yet, despite the initial suggestion or warning or recommendation that absence we would be in the archives, here we are, visible to those who seek. The sage African proverb, I am because we are, therefore I am, gets replayed and remixed. We are because we were, and black folks were in Ithaca. How could our lives possibly escape collection into the archives? We were here. We are here. We Are Here is not an attempt to recapture a Booker T. Washingtonian version of cast down your buckets of where you are. It's not an attempt to lay claim to a land that rightfully belongs to the Cayuga Nation and the Haudenosaunee people. We are here as a matter of existence. It is a matter of being while becoming. It is a matter of fact. And as such, and even though, quote, the black community forged ahead on its own, end quote, we can still be found in the archives. The history may be more difficult to research, rediscover, and retell, but it is there if we shift our lens, or dare I say, if we shift our audience. After a class discussion about the arguments of the Trinidadian scholar Eric Williams and his ideas of the interconnectedness of capitalism, inhumanity, and racial chattel slavery, a student stopped me and asked the following in exasperation: Professor, what am I supposed to do with this information for the rest of my day? It was a jarring question. All jobs, academia included, have a rhythm. The daily cadence of teaching, email, committees, and teaching becomes repetitive. But this question stopped me and gave me pause. What am I supposed to do with this information for the rest of my day? Quickly gathering myself, I could not answer the question for the student. I could only tell the student how I use this information, including archival imagery, to go about my days. What do the counter-narratives tell me? My first response is to quote the comedian Chris Rock. Upon hearing that his grandfather was a Civil War veteran and a South Carolina state senator, Chris Rock was asked his thoughts about the significance of learning his family's history. Rock responds, quote, what does it mean? It would have removed the inevitability that I would become nothing. More importantly than the possibility of nothingness, knowing my history and recouping our collective past provides something much more tangible and concrete, a path toward liberation. The photographs offer examples of existence and possibilities. Knowing counter-narratives is one of the key most essential freedom and emancipatory skills, far beyond the reach of politics, policy, or legislation. It is the insuredness and the salvation of struggle. In the end and in the faces, I see a resiliency and courage. I see a stoic determination and a quiet resolution. For many, even in the eyes of shyness, the expression is one of resolve. I see bravery in being the only one, or one of the only few. I see the same resolve in the photographs of family gatherings or of church congregations. I see a sense of valor in the faces of people. The point here is not to overstate the importance. Photographs are only one of the ways in which we retell our stories. However, throughout the shared history, photographs become iconic and etched into the collective memory of a generation and a nation. Many times, photographs represent ideology and deeply held feelings. The sight does the speaking. The symposium titled Conspicuously Unseen, Invisibility and Denial in Diasporic Communities made me consider the role of audience. Conspicuous or otherwise, unseen by whom? Unseen by all? I began to wonder how much of the black diasporic experience is about its supposed relationship and interaction with whiteness. It takes work to develop a lens that can only selectively see. History is not only about what we uncover and discover. History is much more about what we choose to recover. More research, including genealogy research, is needed to gain a better understanding of these singular collective experiences in photographs. Still, and similar to Dr. Carol Boyce Davies' proclamation about the importance of literature, archival research and archival photographs can be used to, quote, give shape to who we are, to document our existence, and to make sense of our experience and to write ourselves into history. Thank you.